Hello and welcome to the first Global Fleet Champions webinar of 2020. If you're new to our webinars, Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Break, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work. Visit our website globalfleetchampions.org to find out more. In today's webinar, sponsored by Mix Telematics, we will be discussing driving in adverse weather conditions. You will learn the risks of driving in different weather conditions, how safe driving techniques and good vehicle maintenance can help minimise road danger during bad weather, and technologies to ensure drivers' safety. On your screen now, you should be able to see a multiple choice question poll so we can find out your views on this topic. It is anonymous, simply select one answer and press submit, and we will discuss the results at the beginning of the Q&A session, which is your opportunity to ask some of today's presenters any questions you might have. You can put forward your questions at any time during the webinar by using the chat box on the webinar panel. Thank you for your time, and the webinar will now begin.
Good day to you. My name's Jonathan and I'm the director at Mix Telematics, a global safety telematics expert organisation working with some of the biggest and smallest fleets worldwide, specifically on improving vehicle, driver and working practice safety. Today I'm fortunate to have been invited by our partners at Break to speak about best practice for driving in adverse weather conditions. This subject is particularly resonant at this time of year, but even outside of traditional UK wintertime, we're seeing more and more erratic climatic events. So this message really does apply all year round. Just a little bit about myself and the company I work with. I actually work with a group of people all across the world who all believe passionately in making the roads safer for our partners and our families. Personally, I've been working with Break for around 8 years now. And prior to that, I worked for 7 years for PSA Peugeot Citroën, specifically in product management, majoring on safety systems for light commercial vehicles and passenger cars. There are 3 principal themes in today's webinar, beginning with discussing some of the main risks of driving in adverse weather conditions, then advancing to how safe driving practices and well-managed vehicle maintenance can assist in limiting the dangers during these scenarios. Finally, we'll look at some of the available technologies that blend well together with those safe driving practices to comprise holistic adverse weather road risk management strategies. First point I'd like to highlight on our journey is that driving is a risky business, even in proverbially perfect weather conditions, meaning that when adverse conditions are introduced, driving morphs into potentially a very dangerous undertaking. Essentially, vehicles become more hazardous, as do drivers and all of the other variables involved, such as pedestrians, cyclists, other vehicles and drivers. They all become exponentially more unpredictable facets of driving. Human behaviour is by far the most prominent causal factor of road incidents. Ergo, this is the first port of call on our journey today. If we can focus on the top contributory factors to these risky behaviours, speeding, harsh acceleration, braking and cornering, driving under the influence, fatigue and distraction, then we really can begin to control the aspects within our sphere of influence and thereby mitigate risk. To that end, the primary tenets that drivers should centre their attention on are quite simply to slow down, eliminate distractions and manage those potentially hazardous driving behaviours. Speed limits do not exist as a challenge to meet or exceed. They indicate maximum limits under favourable driving conditions, not adverse, and therefore slowing down to well below the speed limit and ensuring a greater gap between vehicles whilst in motion is a hugely positive move for all drivers to undertake. This serves to buy more time for both driver and vehicle reaction in bad weather and will also improve drivers' capability to anticipate and manage potentially unfolding dangers. In the same vein, eliminating distractions should be omnipresent irrespective of driving conditions, but it bears reinforcing as a vital factor in adverse. Managing driving behaviours requires more focus and does benefit from symbiosis with driver engagement and technology, which we'll discuss further presently. The leading priorities for a fleet operator should be to take all available steps to ensure that the fleet is well maintained, with first prize being to be able to predict maintenance faults before they occur. Putting in place a robust and paperless safety checks program is mandatory. This will ensure that there is an optimum equilibrium between an overarching vehicle maintenance program as well as a more granular journey-by-journey preventative measure. Quite simply, ensuring that drivers check that a vehicle is safe to drive before each journey is paramount. If the vehicle isn't safe, then it's vital not to get into that vehicle. Managing vehicle behaviours is a bipartite responsibility between the operator and each and every driver, as we will delve into in more detail shortly. Preparation really is key, and there are some straightforward common sense checkpoints prior to driving that will assist in limiting risk. Regularly check tyres to ensure that they're in good condition and have the correct tread depth. Keep an ice scraper and de-icer in your vehicle at all times in winter. Pack a winter driving kit in case of emergency. This will usually include a torch, a blanket, warm clothes, food and drink, first aid kit, spade, warning triangle and high-vis vest. Always take a well-charged phone in case of emergencies, but of course don't be tempted to use it whilst driving. Ensure that your vehicle is well maintained, serviced appropriately and subject of regular walk-around safety checks. There are also some very common sense driving behaviour prerequisites. Slow down and maintain a safe gap behind the vehicle in front. Be extra vigilant for people and hazards. Always stay in control, and by this I mean look ahead for dangerous situations, don't brake or accelerate harshly, do corner smoothly, don't switch lanes needlessly, and try to eliminate unnecessary manoeuvres. Plan the route ahead constantly and in advance. Be mindful of the risks dependent upon the climate conditions that present themselves. All these different conditions may require an adaptation of approach. For snow and ice, rain and fog, high winds and winter sun, be mindful of the moment and how these different scenarios may impact the driver. With respect to technology and safety checks, you do need to ensure that the vehicle safety checks that are required for your class of vehicle are being undertaken thoroughly, on schedule, to specification, and most importantly, with the genuine willful buy-in of the driver to the purpose of those checks, which is of course to keep that person safe and all the other people on the road too. Irrespective of vehicle class, some of the key elements that are vital to remaining safe and as risk-free as possible are tyre pressure and tread wear. Tyres can be extremely dangerous in adverse weather if the tread wear is near the minimum legal threshold for that type of tyre. So it's much better to change the tyres much earlier than the technical legal threshold, particularly in a season where adverse weather will clearly be regularly forecast. Tyre pressure is also key. There are both manual and integrated solutions for tyre pressure checks. Having the tyre pressure data automatically integrated within the vehicle's telematics data does make it more efficient to see all of this information in one place and with less hassle. Checking the overall tyre condition is also a must. All operators will need to ensure that vehicle lights are operating correctly, including checking they are clean and the bulbs are operating. Oil, water and fluid levels must all be present and significantly above minimum levels. Wiper blades and wheel fixings must also be in full working order. To manage these checks efficiently, I would recommend a vehicle walk-around check app that integrates directly with your vehicle and driver telematics data. This will allow you to have whichever sets of checks you need and manage by exception, defects or incomplete checks. Drivers must also digitally sign off those checks once completed, meaning that you have a full record of accountability. A paperless system is by far the most accountable and efficient way to go. Now, it's a fact that preventative maintenance does reduce risk in adverse weather. Technology can help here in a number of useful ways. Firstly, at a micro level, if a vehicle automatically recognises in its onboard computer that its engine temperature is high or its oil level is low, just for example, then these notifications can be automatically sent to an engineering manager in real time within your fleet in order that maintenance can be planned in before that situation does develop into a critical one. In extreme circumstances, the vehicle may need to immediately be taken off the road. Secondly, at a macro level, all of this constantly collected data can be amalgamated automatically into useful information within trend dashboards for engineering managers to identify prominent trends that require a more fulsome action across a portion of the fleet. The combination of these two approaches can be used to formulate a comprehensive preemptive issue management program, thereby resulting in vehicles becoming safer to drive. At the most advanced level, predictive analytics can be employed as a direct result of mass aggregated big data to identify in advance of issue manifestation where problems are likely to occur. This is an exceedingly effective tool in both resolving and planning for maintenance prior to catastrophic situations developing out on the road. Once again, this type of tool should never be seen in isolation as a panacea, but rather as part of a universal road risk management strategy. There's absolutely no doubt that good driver engagement reinforces safe driving and results in affirmative action from the driver. Where a robust and engaging driver program is in place, supported by complementary technology, I've personally seen fleets benefit from a 66% reduction in overspeeding events, 38% reduction in harsh braking, 44% reduction in harsh acceleration, and overall an 84% improvement in driver safety scores. Encompassing a competitive element to driver improvement is also proven to increase engagement and boost results, and naturally there are apps that help with this. Being able to appropriately and with paramount importance in a non-distracting manner feed back to drivers in real time potentially hazardous driving behaviour events, as well as visual or verbal warning for preventative maintenance events, is also a proven facet of a beneficial strategy for risk mitigation. The final stop on our journey today takes us to heat maps. Now, these are a great tool to plot where risky driving events occur, and through modelling based on periods of adverse weather, they provide invaluable insights into geographical aspects of risk that should then be incorporated into a fleet's risk management programme. Thank you for joining me in our exploration of driving in adverse weather conditions today. I do hope you found some aspects of this webinar useful. My final point is to summarise this talk in a bite-sized checklist of 10 items to leave you with. We've delved into behavioural contributing factors to good risk management, such as slowing down, establishing control, and mitigation of risky driving manoeuvres. We've also discussed the importance of a paperless safety check programme and the absolute preeminence of a robust vehicle maintenance strategy. We've talked about planning ahead, avoiding distractions, engaging drivers, looking at geographical route insights, and of course the importance of good preparation. Last but certainly not least, please do avail yourselves of Break's online learning resources. There's a wealth of especially useful information written by an exceptionally passionate group of people who are there to help us all with making our roads safer, no matter the weather. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to all of your questions.
So hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Break for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on preparing your vehicle for use in all weather conditions. When we talk about weather conditions, there's a number of adverse weather conditions that employees may encounter when driving, depending exactly on where in the world you're operating. Now, this can range from sandstorms and extreme heat in desert regions through to extreme cold, snow and ice in other areas. But the first question I guess we all ought to ask ourselves is it actually safe to drive? So the first thing to consider, of course, is whether the journey you or an employee is about to make in adverse weather conditions is absolutely necessary. Whilst I'm going to talk about vehicle preparation, considering whether the journey should be made at all is the most important thing to decide. And there are two elements to this. First of all is looking at the conditions and weather forecast before any journey is made. And secondly, having a process where an employee can carry out a dynamic risk assessment when weather conditions deteriorate during a journey, and then being allowed to turn back or stop until conditions improve. I can't overemphasize the importance of this, as it's all too easy for an employee to assume that they have to drive regardless of the weather conditions and the possible consequences. Assuming that managers have determined that the journey is of critical importance, then these are some of the things to consider. Vehicles must be fit for purpose. So if an employee may need to make a journey in adverse weather conditions, then the vehicle specification should reflect this. So as an example, if you're expecting employees to drive during or after heavy snowfall or on untreated roads, then you should consider ensuring that all vehicles have four-wheel drive. In those countries where the fitment of electronic stability control is not mandatory, you should ensure that all vehicles have this technology equipped. But a word of caution here, and this is really important. Even when vehicles are suitably equipped, this does not eliminate the risk. Also, employees could be sharing the road with drivers who don't have the appropriate technology fitted to their vehicles. So those vehicles could become stranded, and thereafter the employee could become stranded as well. As such, you should still ensure that you have some sort of mechanism to assess the safety of each journey during adverse weather conditions, regardless of what vehicles are being in use. As another example, when operating in countries where extreme heat can be encountered, then air conditioning should be specified. So you just got to think about where you're operating and what the appropriate equipment for the vehicle is going to be. So we've looked at vehicle specifications briefly, but what ancillary safety equipment is required? If there is a risk that employees must make journeys in extreme weather conditions, then some additional safety equipment should be considered. I think first and foremost, it's important to have a charged mobile telephone, although this should never be used unless the vehicle is parked in a safe place. Having said that, this is not a substitute for good planning, as a vehicle may get stranded in an area where there's no mobile phone signal. So it's important to have a process where the employee, when undertaking a journey in adverse weather condition, tells their manager of their planned route and estimated time of arrival so that they can be traced in the event of an emergency. Other equipment to consider in cold weather, for example, would be a shovel, warm clothing, a torch and some spare batteries, food and drink, and of course an ice scraper. For specification, it really depends on what adverse conditions you're likely to encounter. I'll talk a little bit about tyres. In some countries, the fitment of winter tyres is mandatory, and you should have a process in place to ensure that all employees have changed over to these when the law requires them to do so, or when the weather deteriorates, whichever is the sooner. Now, in countries where winter tyres are not mandatory, but where temperatures are often below 7 degrees C, and 7 degrees C is the sort of switchover temperature where winter tyres perform better than summer tyres, then there can be benefits to fitting winter tyres, but as per the point I was making before with 4x4 vehicles, this doesn't eliminate the risk, and you should ensure that employees don't assume that their journey will be safe and that they need to assess each journey in adverse weather conditions on its own merits. In some countries, especially in mountainous areas, snow chains or studded tyres may be required, although the use of these is usually subject to additional rules and regulations, such as which roads they can be used on, when they can be used, and also what the maximum permissible speed limits are. It's important to ensure that vehicles are always driving a well-maintained and prepared vehicle in any circumstances, but this is especially true when they have to make journeys in adverse weather conditions. So all vehicles should be serviced in line with the manufacturer's recommended schedule to minimise the risk of breakdowns. And in addition, the following routine maintenance should be carried out to ensure that the vehicle is properly prepared. So going back to tyres now, we need to check the tyres, including the spare, because if we haven't got tyres inflated to the correct pressure with the correct tread depth, then we're going to increase our braking distance and we're going to increase the risk of skidding. Now, ideally, car and van tyres should be replaced when they reach 3 millimeters, as wet braking performance deteriorates rapidly after this point, although it's common for tyres, especially on leased vehicles, to be replaced at 2 millimeters. Now, as fleet operators, always remember that you can specify when tyres are changed, although there will obviously be a cost implication if you decide to change at 3 millimeters rather than 2 millimeters. It's imperative that all windows, especially the windscreen, are kept clean and clear both inside and out. This will ensure that the driver has a maximum visibility and reduces eye strain, which is going to help with the fatigue, especially at night or when there is glare from a low sun or reflected light off of wet or icy roads. Now, this involves ensuring that the wiper blades are in good condition and operating correctly, as well as removing the film that typically builds up on the inside of the windscreen. And some people forget this. They focus on the outside of the windscreen, keeping that ice-free, but they forget about the inside. The windscreen wiper fluid should be topped up using the correct mixture to ensure that it doesn't freeze, based on the ambient temperatures that you may be operating in. The engine coolant should be checked regularly and topped up as required, especially when operating in extreme heat. The oil level should be checked and topped up if required to minimise the chance of breakdown, and make sure that the right specification of oil is used based on the expected operating temperatures that you'll be driving in. Ensure that all lights are working and that snow are snow and frost free before starting a journey, so that you can see and be seen more effectively. And last but not least, always ensure that you have enough fuel for the journey, any journey made in adverse weather conditions, with enough spare for contingencies such as getting stranded, so that the engine can be run periodically to help you stay warm when required. To sum up, the safest thing to do is not to drive during adverse weather conditions. But where a manager decides that a journey is of critical importance, employees should be using a vehicle with the correct specifications, they should have the correct ancillary equipment, and they should have prepared the vehicle to cope with the likely conditions they will encounter during the journey. If you've got any questions regarding driving in adverse weather conditions, or if you'd like to find out about any aspect of effective work-related road risk management, then please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richard Leonard. I'm Head of Road Safety at Highways England, and today we're going to talk about winter driving. I'm going to tell you a bit about Highways England, who we are, what we do to keep you safe driving on our network, and we're also going to give you some tips and advice to make sure you have safe and reliable journeys. So firstly, who's Highways England? So Highways England works on behalf of the Department for Transport. Our role is to maintain, modernise and improve our network. We've got 4,300 miles of road and A roads. Our aim is to connect the country to make sure that we deliver goods to ports, people to work, petrol to pumps and foods to shop. The network comprises 2% of all of England's road, but carries about a third of traffic, 2/3 of freight. Safety is our first and most important imperative, and we want no one to be harmed when working or travelling on our roads. So what do we do to keep you moving in the winter? We really do care about your journey, and in the winter we've got over 1,300 trained gritter staff based across the country, making sure that we tackle wintry weather, and our traffic officers and regional traffic control centres are on hand 24/7 to monitor the network and to make sure that if you do get into difficulties, assistance is provided. We do monitor the weather around the clock. We've got over 250 weather stations at location across the network, and our overhead signs are used to warn you about changing conditions. To help keep moving this winter, we've got over 535 gritters providing service across the network, 127 depots, 25 snow blowers, and more than 280,000 tonnes of salt, which can cover 610,000 lane miles of motorways. If you're delivering goods on our network, if you're heading to friends and family or taking part in daily commute, we really do care about your journeys, and over the winter we're prepared, tried and tested plans to make sure you get to your destination safe and well. So what can you do for winter driving, and what can you do to be prepared? Our first key piece of advice is to make sure that you plan for your journey in wintry weather. And to be prepared for things that change. And we often don't think about wintry weather. A good tip is that when the clocks change in October, to think about your winter pack in your vehicle. And remember, unplanned things can happen, unexpected things can happen. So make sure that you have some essentials as shown on the screen, some water, de-icer, some food. Make sure you've got your mobile phone charger, and maybe a battery pack. Make sure you've got a snow shovel. And also in winter, there are different challenges for driving. So make sure you do some pre-vehicle checks. You'll be used to doing pre-vehicle checks and journey checks as part of your vehicle checks before you head out of depot or before you head out. But actually, it's also worth thinking about before you get to the depot, driving to the depot in your car, think about that. And if the weather is forecast to be poor, or if there are issues forecast in the weather, we'd ask you to do two things. Plan your journey. Think about whether your journey is really necessary. Consider to wait if you can wait a few hours to the weather improves. And also, just think about, is it essential to travel in poor weather when it's forecast? I've got some tips for winter driving advice, and these tips you probably as professional drivers are fully aware of, but it's always useful just to remember some things that you can do to make sure you have safe journeys. So firstly, when you're driving, a key point to remember is to change your driving style to the conditions. Make sure you brake and accelerate and steer carefully, particularly if you're on an incline or driving an articulated vehicle. Ensure the tractor unit is pulling the trailer at all times. And if traction is lost while driving, hold the vehicle straight, ease off the accelerator and brake gently. So some specific tips for that. So in fog, check the lights, lenses, and reflectors are clean, positioned correctly, and working properly. Always use dipped headlights so they can be seen. Do not use your main beam because it can dazzle other drivers. And you should always make sure you turn your lights off when the fog lifts and visibility improves. In snow, stick to the main roads wherever possible. Reduce your speed and allow greater stopping distances than normal. Always use dipped headlights and be aware that the road markings and signage may be unclear. If your vehicle does get stuck, engage differential lock or use highest possible gear to improve traction. And also, if you do get stuck, of course, contact Highways England. We'll be monitoring the network and we can send traffic officers out to come and help you if you need it. In heavy rain, use headlights when visibility is reduced. Maintain at least a 4-second gap between you and the vehicle head. Traction will be reduced, so accelerate and brake carefully. And think of the consequences of driving through deep curbside puddles. It's often it is an offence if you drive through a puddle and you soak pedestrians on the side of the road. So some further advice, it's really interesting. Sun, particularly in the winter, can affect your visibility, and always have some sunglasses in. Often people don't think of that in the winter months. And snow, ice or rain can cause glare. Ice, so icy conditions, what we'd ask you to do is to be aware that rain can turn ice and you can get black ice on the roads, so monitor the temperature outside the cab. And if there is icy conditions like snow, you need to allow 10 times the normal braking distance and avoid heavy braking distance, as this can cause the vehicle to jackknife. High winds, particular problems, and HGVs are particularly prone to this. So if you can avoid exposed sections of the road, such as high bridges, viaducts, remember that crosswinds in particular, and there are known locations on our network, we do have to close parts of our network. And there are certain vehicle types which are particularly prone in terms of double-deck trailers and curtain side vehicles. And we do issue warnings about these conditions in particular. Our last piece of advice is, weather conditions can change. You need to keep up to date with the weather forecast and modify your planned routes accordingly. And listen to the radio, look at our overhead signs, which will give you further advice on driving in the winter. And in terms of Highways England, how to get in contact with us, we want everyone to get home safe and well. We want no one to be harmed on our network, and we want you to have safe and reliable journeys on our network. Winter weather conditions can make driving harder and more dangerous for you and everyone around you. Prior planning and preparation are absolutely critical for your safety. Be prepared, know how to react, and this will reduce the likelihood of having an incident on our network and keep you and others safe. And there are a range of ways to keep up to date with traffic and travel information and our planned works. I've outlined some of them on the slide. And get in touch. And safety is our #1 priority, and we want you and all other users to get home safe and well.
Hello, this is Mark Hooksema. I'm Chief Meteorologist at Earth Networks, and I'm going to talk to you about global fleet management and predicting bad weather. My role at Earth Networks is I'm in charge of the Meteorological Operations Division. We do global forecasting around the world that includes transportation and logistics clients. So how does weather affect fleet operations? There are many things that will affect fleet operations, and weather is just one that can have huge effects on the business. And the effects of weather can vary drastically by season, so there are changing concerns to stay on top of by operational staff. One of the most important are conditions along the planned route. Short routes and long hauls can have many different weather threats, and these weather threats can often change very rapidly. Poor conditions obviously create unsafe conditions. Safety is not just on the road, but it can also be during the operational processes of loading and unloading or being outside a vehicle in severe weather. And for dispatchers, a wide range of weather threats and rapidly changing threats can require on-the-spot decision-making that can have high costs. And lastly, significant weather and severe weather can be hard on the fleet, causing greater frequency and need for safety checks and repairs. So let's talk some numbers. These are numbers for the US, but are representative for mid-latitude areas around the globe that experience a wide range of weather hazards across all seasons. Out of all highway incidents, 21% or 1.26 million crashes are weather-related. 24% of weather-related incidents happen when ice and snow are on the road, and 15% of which when it is actually snowing or raining. Note that more winter weather incidents happen after the precipitation has stopped. This is a sign that shows us that drivers probably drive more carefully when it's snowing or raining, but then let their guard down. Wet roads are the big culprit of all weather-related incidents, and that would be that 70% of these incidents are caused when the pavement is wet. So let's talk more specifically about some weather threats. Winter storms can serve up a wide variety of weather conditions. These weather conditions will change rapidly across short distances and also across short time frames. You will need a good source for checking weather information across space and time. Because precipitation types can change rapidly over small distances, road conditions will as well. Be especially aware of transition zones in forecasting forecast while driving. Changing elevation also causes rapid change in precipitation types. Going from valley to mountain and passes can cause precipitation to go from rain to snow and back again and have a mix in between. And again, after the precipitation stops, there are still hazards. In fact, snowstorms often have strong winds after the snow has ended, and this creates sudden changes with whiteouts from blowing snow and snow recovering recently plowed roads. Another seasonal threat in the spring and summer are severe storms. Spring and summer severe storms bring on a whole different set of concerns. Timing for developing storms is critical. Storms can become severe very rapidly. They can form out of a clear sky with rapidly building cumulus clouds, and the sky becomes dark and lightning starts to hit the ground. You'll want to have a source to receive timely warnings in these events. Also, any storm can create very heavy rainfall with low visibility. You don't necessarily need to be warned of a storm that has high winds to have hazards that are created on the roads. Rain rates change rapidly as a storm moves in, and you'll get ponding and flooding of roads, which will cause all kinds of new hazards as you travel across the distances that you're traveling. Severe wind gusts also can occur before the rain hits. If you see dark skies on the horizons, or if you've had a warning issued for your location, you'll want to begin to take precautions. You'll want to slow down or even pull off the road to prepare for rapidly changing weather conditions. A hazard that doesn't get nearly as much attention when it comes to hazardous road weather is low visibility. Fog, for one, is most common during the northern hemisphere, and it's also most common in valleys and coastal marine environments. Fog also is something that can be missed because it's a weather threat that often occurs when the weather is actually good and is forecasted to be very nice during the day, but dense fog occurs in the mornings. Low visibility hazard is a significant for dense fog, blowing snow, dust, and smoke situations where the visibility can drop to zero in very short distances. Dense fog events cause some dramatic highway incidents involving many vehicles. Some of the worst highway incidents are due to low visibility. An example, back in 1990, on December 11 in the morning, on a stretch of interstate in Tennessee, there was a dense fog situation where visibility went rapidly to zero and led to a 70-car pileup. Dust, smoke, and blowing snow with whiteouts can create similar situations. In the list of worst highway incidents caused by weather in the US, there are dense fog, dust, and blowing snow events at the top of the list. What are some of the challenges in fleet operations? There are important decisions concerning safety versus delays. Bad weather can create bottlenecks in operations, resulting in lost production and downtime. Also, who's responsible? Multiple points of responsibility can create confusing situations, with different messages and actions being taken by different responsible areas. It's not always clear who has responsibility for communicating severe weather forecast plans. Planning for weather events and subsequent action should be well communicated and centrally located if possible. This will guarantee consistent and clear alerts being passed along to operations. Severe weather. What you need is secure, trusted sources that have quality, real-time data. You also want to have a source that has updates very frequently, updates in forecasts and in the data that you're looking at. You also want access to professional meteorologists who are watching your operations. It should be designed for commercial use with service level agreements that guarantee redundancy and uptime. The second step is planning ahead. You want to plan and practice for different events that could affect your operations. Have plans for all your tasks and different locations where you have different distribution points. Have a playbook for different weather scenarios. Also, create a central policy to keep everyone on the same message and plan. Practice that plan too. That's also very important. And to keep all your stakeholders on the same message, give them all access to the same tools. One example is to stay away from free weather apps. Free weather apps are a problem because they're not always trusted. It's hard to get through what is current information or what is old information. Also, stay away from social media commentary. There are many poor sources of information out there that might look official and even look like someone knowledgeable is providing it. All these do is create confusion. Free data is often very general and almost always not specific to your business concern. Also, they usually don't have any support and there's no service level agreements to guarantee their uptime. You'll want to find a system that provides high reliability for alerting on a wide variety of weather parameters and alert types. Also, multiple delivery options for alerts, whether it be email or SMS or mobile on your mobile devices. You'll also want the ability to be used on the go and outside of the operations center. So mobile-friendly applications such as the spheric maps that we have is a good source for that sort of information. So how do you get total protection for severe weather? You want a trusted source for weather information with multiple ways to receive weather alerts and have real-time storm tracking. You should have a source for forecasts that will push you new forecasts as the weather threats are changing. Also, having access to 24/7 access to meteorologists to answer questions is critical for keeping up with changing events and ensuring accuracy in decision making. Having a plan and a trusted source will go a long way to keeping your staff safe and business running efficiently. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. We've now come to the end of our presentations for the webinar, and it is now time for our Q&A session. So it's not too late to put forward your questions. Simply use the chat box, which you should be able to see. But before we do start looking at and answering some of your questions, we'd just like to share with you the results of the poll, which we obviously had on your screen at the beginning of the webinar. So the results show that, does your fleet currently consider weather conditions when planning its journeys? 38% said always, 50% said sometimes, 6% said never, and 6% said don't know. So what I'd like to do is just invite Jonathan Bates from Mix Telematics just to comment on those results. Jonathan, can you hear us okay?
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I think it shows that there's probably some way to go for everybody to be 100% confident that they are planning. I think it was interesting listening to what Mark was just saying about free weather apps. So I just wonder whether it's the percentage of people that don't do it or don't do it all the time. Perhaps they don't have access to a reliable data source that they can integrate with their journey planning. So potentially Mark can recommend something on there, but it'd be interesting to see the detail behind it.
Definitely, thank you for that. So whilst we've got you on the line, Jonathan, we've got a few two questions which have come in for you actually. So obviously your presentation was first. How should fleets best communicate safe driving tips to their drivers?
I think it needs to be part of an ongoing driver engagement program, Sarah. So I don't think it can be something that people just do once a year in like a conference or something like that. I think it needs to be part of an ongoing program, and really the best way that I've seen that working with clients that I work with is a combination of technology, but really the technology is then used, like a driver engagement app, for instance, that needs to be used together with an ongoing driver safety program with regular interactions between drivers and supervisors, where both the driver and the supervisor has got access to that individual driver's recent historical data, and then they can zone in on any particular behaviours that that driver perhaps needs to improve. And I think that's probably the best way to convey a really meaningful and useful message around those behaviours.
Definitely, thank you. And a second question which is coming for you is, how can fleets conduct preventative maintenance for bad weather without relying on this kind of forecasting technology? Do you think that's something which fleets can do?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between preventative and predictive. So the real advanced forecasting stuff is more predictive, and that's really using more kind of machine learning and big data to look at quite a long-term trends over time and then make predictions. I think that's probably trickier, and you know we're in that business of doing that now. But it's not, let's say, massively prevalent in the market. We don't see that many people doing that yet. But preventative is a different case, and that's really just having that kind of pre-warning information being put to use. So, you know, as soon as a light comes on in a vehicle, then getting that information to the engineering manager, making sure that there's a process of escalation with that type of information so that vehicles are maintained before something more serious happens. I think that's, you know, that's commonly done and is pretty straightforward to implement. And I think alongside that, doing the pre-vehicle safety checks is a great way before the vehicle's out on the road to highlight any potential issues. And as I said in my presentation, I think the main challenge we're seeing in the market there is that a lot of people are still using paper-based solutions, which you know, not only are they time constrained, but they also mean that there aren't those kind of automated alerts happening, and exception reports are a lot harder to produce. And it's really those exceptions to when things aren't being done properly that allow fleets to improve most quickly. So I think the combination of those two things would be useful to hopefully most of the attendees.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Jonathan. Now I'm going to go to Mark if I can. Can you hear me okay, Mark?
Hello.
Hi there. So obviously we've been talking about forecasting. Where would you suggest the responsibility should lie for communicating weather forecasting plans?
Well, it's kind of a multi-faceted responsibility, but it does start with the operations and planning teams to keep on top of, you know, spatially all the weather threats that could affect the fleet. So it starts with having a source that's going to tell you, kind of highlight areas where there could be threats over the next several days or weeks, and then having those be focused on and then transferred down to the drivers that would go through areas with threats. And it also is hinging on the drivers to seek out updated information, because forecasts and weather changes rapidly, and one forecast you get one day could be old within 6 hours. So it is important to constantly be checking on how the weather might be changing on the route that would be planned, or maybe even alternate routes that are being looked at.
Brilliant, thank you. So you mentioned the responsibility lies obviously with a few different people at different levels, but obviously, you know, decisions come from those usually at the top. So how would you suggest we make the case for investing in weather prediction to senior management, the key decision makers?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think the case is usually made based on, you know, the problems that they are running into with weather, and educating themselves on that there actually are low cost options to stay informed about the weather and get reliable information. It's not something that has to be very complicated and expensive. There are a wide variety of products available. There are new developments in road weather forecasting, products that actually forecast how the roads will be, not just the weather, but if a road will be just wet or if it will become snow and ice covered. So it definitely takes some research, and, you know, folks that don't have a weather source that's going to provide them with all their threat information and push them important forecast changes and things like that, you know, they should look into all the options out there. There are options that are affordable across the spectrum, that can keep you away from trying to be your own meteorologist. We see a lot of people who they have to watch, you know, the TV meteorologist to try and figure out what their concerns should be. And, you know, there are a lot of options out there, and I would suggest that, you know, those folks that are in charge of this to research it out and talk to different people and see what products are out there and what they cost. There's usually something within the price point for everybody.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Mark. Andy, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Brilliant. So your presentation obviously was looking at how to prepare your vehicle for all weather conditions. What are some of the effective ways for getting drivers to remember to conduct these checks before they set off?
Well, I think like with most aspects of effective work-related road risk management, it's having a good culture so that drivers know that you're taking safety seriously, and having a good sort of ongoing dialogue with the drivers about general road safety issues. Now, this isn't something that's just to do in winter, or when weather conditions deteriorate. This should be happening all the year round. But if the drivers are used to getting these messages, then they're more likely to take some of them on board. And I think it's important as well to make sure that some sort of auditing is taking place. And we've heard a lot about sort of larger vehicles today, but of course we've got van drivers and car drivers out there as well. And how many managers check their employees' cars, especially? So I think there's an onus on management to communicate regularly, but to have some sort of audit process to make sure that those communications are effective.
Brilliant, thank you. And what would you say perhaps the top 3 things would be to include in that audit?
Well, just to sort of, you know, we talked about the importance of tyres. You know, is the car or is the van, has it got legal tyres? You know, a tread depth check is a very, very simple thing to do. You know, if you're in an office and you've got a car park full of cars, you know, how many people are driving off in poor weather without having sort of made sure all the windscreens are fully clear? Things like that. You know, have they got the right sort of safety equipment if you're expecting them to make journeys in bad weather that we've talked about today? Is it all in the boot? And very simply, and I've been to a number of organisations, and this is especially true, more true with car drivers and drivers of larger vehicles, is that some people don't even know where the bonnet release is. So have they done their sort of checking their oil? Have they topped up their fluids? And the answer is probably not. They rely on their regular servicing to make that happen. So it's very simple things like that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andy. Great, well that now leaves me on to say a huge thank you to all of you today for attending today's webinar sponsored by Mix Telematics. We hope you have enjoyed today and found the presentations useful. Our next webinar will be taking place in March, and you can view all of our upcoming webinars online at globalfleetchampions.org. We do really appreciate any feedback, so please do complete our short feedback form, which will appear on your screen once the webinar ends. If you would like to watch again, or you missed a part of the webinar today, we will be uploading the recording to our Global Fleet Champions website shortly. Thank you again to today's presenters, and of course to our sponsor Mix Telematics. We hope you can join us again soon and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.